A single man, in a small, dark room, took down the internet in an entire country. Not for ransom, not for money, but for something far more dangerous: revenge. For 6 days in 2023, Libya, a country of nearly 7 million people, vanished from the web. No websites, no social media, no emails, nothing. And it wasn't caused by war or power outages. It was one man, sitting behind a keyboard. To understand how this happened, we need to go back to 2011, Arab Spring, Muammar Gaddafi, and a rising power vacuum. Because the real story starts before the hacker ever wrote a line of code. After the fall of Gaddafi, Libya splintered. 2 rival governments, countless militias, and one thing that held more power than most people realized: the internet. The company in charge of Libya's internet backbone was called LTT, Libya Telecom and Technology. It was state-owned and state-controlled, and that made it the perfect tool for surveillance, propaganda, and control. If you controlled the internet, you controlled the narrative. Nobody knows his real name, but online he called himself 0xm03, a Libyan hacker, anonymous, political, and pissed off. By 2022, 0xm03 had built a quiet reputation in hacking forums. He was fluent in code. He understood networks. And more importantly, he understood how fragile the Libyan internet really was. You see, Libya's entire internet infrastructure ran through a handful of core systems, and only one company, LTT, was maintaining it. The passwords? Weak. The software? Outdated. The firewall? Barely there. So why would a man want to take down his own country's connection to the world? According to leaked forum messages later verified by Wired, 0xm03 blamed LTT and the Libyan government for everything: rigged elections, power cuts, fake news campaigns, and surveillance of journalists. In his words, they watch everything, they log everything, and they lie. And there was one more thing. LTT had begun throttling certain content, blocking opposition websites, silencing activists. So 0xm03 made a decision. If they were going to weaponize the internet, he was going to take it away from them. Over the course of 8 months, 0xm03 began mapping Libya's digital infrastructure. He traced fiber lines. He studied DNS servers. He reverse-engineered network paths. In short, he created a blueprint, not just of a company, but of an entire country's connection to the global web. His target? LTT's core routers, the nerve center. They weren't in a bunker. They weren't behind military-grade firewalls. They were in Tripoli, in a regular building, with remote access points. On the night of February 23, 2023, at 2:03 a.m. local time, something strange happened. A silent flood of traffic hit LTT's network. It wasn't random. It was surgical. The routers began to fail. One by one, BGP sessions dropped. DNS requests stalled. Then, nothing. When Libyans woke up the next morning, there was no WhatsApp, no Twitter, no Google. Most assumed it was a temporary glitch, maybe a server crash. But inside LTT, engineers were panicking. The system wasn't down. It had been wiped. Logs were erased. Credentials overwritten. Recovery partitions deleted. Someone had taken control of the entire root infrastructure and burned the bridge behind them. Across Libya, confusion turned into anger. Businesses halted. Banks couldn't operate. Hospitals lost access to cloud-based records. And then, the rumors started. They're hiding something. It's a government cover-up. Foreign spies attacked us. But it wasn't a foreign operation. It was local, personal, intentional. 2 days into the blackout, a post appeared on a private hacking forum. It was simple, just a screenshot of LTT's internal router system, logged in, live. The caption: "If you control the internet, you control the truth. I choose neither." It was signed 0xm03. At first, the Libyan government denied the hack. They blamed technical maintenance. But behind the scenes, they were desperate. They contacted foreign cybersecurity experts and began tracing the attack. One clue, an IP address linked to a VPN node in Germany. Another, a code snippet traced to a GitHub repository last updated from Tunisia. The problem? None of it pointed to a person, only to ghosts. 0xM03 had vanished. 6 days after the blackout began, service slowly returned, piece by piece. Backup systems reloaded, DNS manually rebuilt. But the damage had been done. In a leaked memo, LTT's engineers admitted, the breach was total. There was no firewall defense. We didn't even see it coming. The Libyan government passed emergency cybersecurity laws, increased surveillance, hired foreign consultants, and labeled 0xM03 a cyber terrorist. But the public didn't see him that way. On Telegram channels across North Africa, people began sharing memes of a lone figure in a hoodie, sitting in front of a laptop. Libya's map behind him crossed out. He became a digital Robin Hood. Some called him reckless, others called him brave, but almost everyone agreed. He exposed something no one wanted to admit, that a nation's internet, its very connection to truth and the world, could be held together by a single weak password. As of today, 0xM03 has never been caught, never been named, never been seen. Some believe he fled Libya. Others say he's still there watching. There are theories, rumors, conspiracies, that he was a former employee, that it was a coordinated attack by activists, that the government actually let it happen to justify new surveillance powers. But the truth? Still offline. One man, one motive, one keyboard, and just like that, a whole country disappears from the internet. But the story doesn't end there, because the blackout of 2023 wasn't just a technical event. It was a mirror held up to a nation's face, a warning, prophecy, question. What happens when the very thing that connects us, the invisible threads of data, the digital lifeblood of a modern society, is suddenly violently cut? For 6 days, Libya became a case study in digital fragility, a living experiment in what happens when a country's digital arteries are severed. The world watched, but few understood the true scale of the chaos. In Tripoli, the capital, the silence was deafening. Cafes that once buzzed with the glow of smartphones and the hum of laptops now sat empty, their Wi-Fi routers blinking uselessly. University students, cut off from online classes, gathered in small groups trading rumors and speculation. Business owners, unable to process payments or contact suppliers, stared at dead screens, their livelihoods on pause. In the east, in Benghazi, doctors at the city's largest hospital found themselves locked out of patient records. A surgeon, prepping for a critical operation, discovered that the cloud-based imaging system was unreachable. He had to rely on memory, on paper notes, on the shaky recollections of nurses. A single keystroke made hundreds of miles away had rippled outwards, turning modern medicine into a guessing game. In the south, in Sava, a family tried to call their son, studying abroad in Italy. The call never connected. For days they had no word, no news, no way to know if he was safe, or if he even knew what was happening back home. Across the country, the blackout became more than an inconvenience. It became a wound, a reminder of how much had changed since 2011, and how much had stayed the same. Because in the years after Gaddafi's fall, Libya had tried to rebuild. New governments rose and fell. Militias became political parties, then militias again. Elections were promised, then postponed. But through it all, the internet remained the one constant, a lifeline to the outside world, a tool for organizing, for protesting, for dreaming, and as 0xM03 saw, a tool for control. The seeds of the blackout were planted in those chaotic years. When LTT, flush with new government contracts, chose speed over security. When engineers, underpaid and overworked, reused passwords and skipped software updates. when politicians, fearing dissent, ordered the quiet throttling of opposition websites, when activists desperate to be heard turned to encrypted messaging apps, only to find those too were being monitored. 0xM03 watched all of this. He watched as friends were arrested for tweets, as journalists disappeared after publishing stories about corruption, as the internet, once a symbol of hope, became a weapon, a leash, a cage. He wasn't always a hacker. In another life, he might have been a teacher, a writer, a builder, but the world he inherited demanded something else. It demanded a ghost, a shadow, a man who could slip through firewalls and vanish into code. His first hacks were small, defacing a government website, leaking a list of officials' email addresses. But each act was a message. We are watching you too. You are not untouchable. By 2022, he was a legend in certain corners of the internet. A name whispered in chat rooms, a handle scrawled on the walls of abandoned buildings. But he was also careful, paranoid. He used burner phones, disposable laptops, VPNs that changed every hour. He never stayed in one place for long. He trusted no one. The plan to take down LTT was born not out of anger, but out of exhaustion, a sense that nothing would change unless something broke. He spent months gathering information, not just technical details, but human ones. Who had access to what? Which engineers were careless with their credentials? Which buildings had the weakest physical security? He mapped it all. Every router, every switch, every cable. He found his opening in a forgotten admin panel, left exposed to the internet. The password was 123456. He laughed when he saw it. He cried too, because it was so easy, because it was so sad. The attack itself was almost anticlimactic. A few scripts, a few well-timed commands, and the entire backbone of Libya's internet began to unravel. He watched as BGP sessions dropped, as DNS servers went dark, as the country blinked out of existence. He didn't celebrate. He didn't gloat. He simply logged off and waited. The aftermath was chaos. Inside LTT, engineers worked around the clock, trying to piece together what had happened. They found nothing. No logs, no traces, just a single message left on a hidden partition. You built this prison. I opened the door. The government scrambled to respond. They called in experts from Europe, from Russia, from the Gulf. They offered rewards for information. They raided the homes of suspected dissidents. But they found nothing. 0xM03 was a ghost, a rumor, a myth. On the streets, people whispered his name. Some cursed him, blaming him for lost business, for missed opportunities, for the fear that now gripped the country. Others praised him, calling him a hero, a liberator, a man who had shown the world just how fragile their freedom really was. In the days that followed, the government tightened its grip. New laws were passed, criminalizing cyber sabotage. Internet cafes were raided. VPNs were banned. But the damage was done. The illusion of control was shattered. People had seen the truth, that their digital world was built on sand. Internationally, the blackout made headlines. Cybersecurity experts debated the technical details. Was it an inside job? A foreign attack? A fluke? But for Libyans, the answer was simpler. It was a reckoning, a moment when the invisible became visible, when the wires that bound them together were revealed to be chains. In the months that followed, life slowly returned to normal. The internet came back, but it was different, slower, more heavily monitored. People were more careful about what they posted, what they shared, what they said. A new kind of silence settled over the country. Not the silence of a blackout, but the silence of fear. And somewhere, in a small, dark room, a man watched. He watched as the government rebuilt its walls, as the people adjusted to their new reality. He wondered if it had been worth it, if anything had really changed. He wondered if he would ever be able to return home, to walk the streets of Tripoli without looking over his shoulder. He wondered if anyone would ever know his name. But he also knew this. For 6 days, he had given his country a gift, a glimpse of what was possible, a reminder that power, no matter how absolute, is always an illusion. And so the legend of 0xM03 grew. He became a symbol, not just in Libya, but across the region, a warning to those who would use technology as a weapon, a hope for those who dreamed of something better. In the end, the story of the Libyan blackout is not just about one man, or one country, or one act of revenge. It is about the world we are building, the world we are inheriting, the world we are losing. It is about the power of a single keystroke, the fragility of our connections, the dangers of forgetting that behind every line of code, every server, every router, there are people with hopes, with fears, with the power to change everything. And so, as the world moves forward, as governments build bigger firewalls, as companies invest in stronger passwords, as activists find new ways to be heard, the question remains: who controls the internet? Who controls the truth? And what happens when, for just a moment, one man decides to pull the plug? The answer, as Libya learned in 2023, is both terrifying and liberating, because in the end, the internet is not just a network of machines. It is a network of people. And sometimes, all it takes is one. In the years since the blackout, the story of 0xM03 has become a kind of digital folklore. His name appears in graffiti on the walls of Tripoli, in hashtags on Twitter, in whispered conversations in internet cafes. He is a ghost, a myth, a reminder of what is possible when the powerless find a way to strike back. But for those who lived through those 6 days, the memory is still raw. A business owner in Misrata remembers the panic as his online store went dark, as orders piled up, as customers demanded answers he couldn't give. A student in Tobruk recalls the frustration of missing a scholarship deadline, of watching her dreams slip away because an email couldn't be sent. A doctor in Tripoli still shudders at the thought of operating without access to patient records, of making life or death decisions in the dark. For them, the blackout was not a story. It was a wound, a scar, a lesson in the dangers of centralization, of complacency, of trusting too much in systems that were never built to last. And for the government, the lesson was even harsher. They learned that control is never absolute, that power, once challenged, is never the same. They learned to fear the shadows, to watch the forums, to listen for the footsteps of ghosts. But perhaps the most important lesson was for the world. For every country that relies on a single company, a single password, a single point of failure. For every government that believes it can control the narrative, silence dissent, rewrite history with the click of a mouse. The story of 0xM03 is a warning. The internet is not a fortress. It is a house of cards. And sometimes, all it takes is a single breath to bring it all crashing down. So the next time you log on, the next time you send an email, or post a tweet, or check the news, remember Libya, remember the blackout, remember the man in the dark room, and the power he held in his hands. Because in the end, the story of 0xM03 is not just about revenge. It is about possibility, about the thin line between order and chaos, between freedom and control, between connection and isolation. It is a story that is still being written, and somewhere, in the shadows, the next chapter is waiting.